Nexus got to sit down and chat with Assassin's Creed Odyssey writer Daniel Bingham.
Let's jump right into it. So why Greece?
So Assassin's Creed games have always prided themselves in putting players at pivotal points in human history.
Yeah.
And I mean, Greece specifically, it's 431 BC, the golden age of Athens. So there was a lot of conflict, there was a lot of contrast. You know, you had people who were still very superstitious and very much believing in the gods.
Yeah.
But then you also had philosophers like Socrates showing up,
Yep.
you know, who's like rational thinking was really messing people's minds up. You had, the Athenian general Pericles, who, was starting to, take the first steps towards democracy.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the Peloponnesian War, Athens versus Sparta, all of Greece tearing itself apart. So it was really the perfect place to, put a player as a mercenary. And also we really wanted to connect the first civilization bloodline to our story.
Okay.
That was one of the main pillars that we had for the vision of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And so we felt order versus free will. That was a great spot for it.
Where is the first story? Where is the first story actually going?
I don't want to spoil too much on where it's going.
It's going. It's going
absolutely going somewhere. I'd love for players to experience it.
Yeah. And is there a definitive ending in sight?
Well, again, the players will get to experience what they want in Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Yes.
And I think they'll be pleased, fans, because in previous titles, that first civilization storyline always kind of ran parallel to the main path. We really wanted to connect it to our story and make it part of the story.
Yeah.
Cassandra Alexios is a descendant of Leonidas, the fallen king of Sparta, and he had the first civilization bloodline coursing through his veins.
Was the game actually written for Cassandra?
Well, I will tell you that when we're writing the scripts, Cassandra's name shows up on the in the dialogue software, and but I was always very much had both characters in mind when writing.
The reason why I ask is because when you actually play the game, you start to pick up on the fact that characters seem to interact with Cassandra a little bit more naturally than when they do with Alexios. So was that actually planned, or was that just kind of how it happened?
Well, who the protagonist or the antagonist is, again, players will find out when they play the game. But Cassandra was definitely, a favorite to write for. Loved working with her, and but I would always, when writing, keep in mind, I had to split my brain in two whenever writing these characters. Whether it's an Alexios in this situation or whether it's a Cassandra.
How was it actually writing for these characters? Where did the inspiration come from to actually write for Alexios and Cassandra and be able to, like you said, separate your mind between the two characters to actually write them, that they are each independent characters within the world. So how did that actually happen?
Well, in a way, you could almost say that I had been preparing for this role myself almost my entire life. I'd always been a fan of Greek mythology. I think Clash of the Titans was one of my favorite movies as a kid. I don't know if people remember that claymation Medusa.
Yes.
I studied the classics in university, and so I took my inspiration from everywhere. A lot of it from Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey. And then when I came on board the project, I did at least a month worth of research before I wrote a single word of dialogue.
Yeah.
So reading whatever I could, Plato, reading as much Plato as I could to get a sense of what Socrates sounds like, so that could inspire me to write his voice. Of course, I was always a fan of the graphic novel. I was a big fan of the film. I was also a big reader of the book Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. I don't know if anyone's read that, but it's an amazing historical fiction. The thing that's great about those is that, they were so iconic in pop culture. It was actually a very challenge to kind of step away from that and make it not just a repetition of what people have already seen. The main challenge is that it was very historically accurate. Except for the monsters and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, specifically the story, the Battle of 300, and a lot of those events are recorded as history. So it's going to look the same, and it's going to, so I definitely tried, because I had the pleasure and the honor of writing the Leonidas, the opening scenes, and so I had to try and almost forget everything that I had read and learned. And even then, as much as we tried to not make it, as soon as people saw those red capes and the speech and the battle, and they're like, oh, 300.
How were you guys able to actually flesh out these characters with their personalities the way that they are?
We took whatever we could find, first of all. If any of these characters had said anything that was recorded, we would try to use that.
Yes.
We have our historian on board, who was amazing, because she would tell us how these people lived. And for us, that was one of the most important things, is what they did on a day-to-day basis. What did they believe in? You know, what did they eat? You know, where did they sleep? What was, and with all that in mind, that helped us create these characters and how they would behave and interact with each other.
So how many people do you guys actually work with when you're creating these stories? I mean, you know,
In total?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there was something like 700 of us spread across studios across the world. Yeah,
that
just
must have been crazy.
It was wild, and you know, so it's the biggest Assassin's Creed game we've ever created, with the most amount of. There's over 30 hours of interactive dialogue in the game, so I know we have, you know, at least a dozen writers spread over 3 studios. Yeah, so it was a massive team.
Why was there such a heavy emphasis on the choice consequence system in Odyssey?
Well, we definitely, at the very beginning, you know, we really wanted to give player agency. We really, you know, we really wanted to fulfill in our promise to players that, because we've always considered history as our playground, and we really wanted to make history your playground. And so instead of, you know, in the past where, you know, whenever the story comes up, instead of putting down the controller and watching it passively, we really wanted to keep players engaged. You know, our creative director, Jonathan Zumon, told me, like, almost day one, he goes, I don't want players to hear the story. I want them to participate in the story. So I literally put that on a Post-it and stuck it to my monitor. So that was really at the heart of everything. And for Assassin's Creed, you know, we always wanted people to interact with history. That's always been, I think, the most fun. I know for me, meeting those historical characters was always the most fun. So we really wanted players to actually be able to have conversations with them, you know, to discuss medicine with Hippocrates, or to debate philosophy with Socrates. You know, we really wanted to make that possible. So, you know, interactive dialogues was the way to go.
What was the significance of actually being a female character in terms of Cassandra with the war?
It was extremely significant, you know, and it was part of the whole mission to push Assassin's Creed towards a full open world RPG, where player choice really is the heart of everything. And we really wanted to open up to as many players as possible, and the first choice we wanted to give the players is to whether play as a female or a male.
Who are your inspirations for writing?
I draw it from everywhere. You know, I was reading a lot of Stephen Pressfield before. Like so many authors, as many authors as I can. Homer was big. J.R.R. Tolkien, George R.R. Martin. You know, like I love all those fantasy books. You know, films as well. I draw my inspiration from many movies, television, especially television. You know, shows like Shameless, and you know, just a lot of family shows where there's a lot of drama, and again, Game of Thrones as well. Like I love that stuff. Like I was listening to the Game of Thrones soundtrack a lot while writing. You know, and depending on the type of quest that I was writing, I would very often be listening to a similar theme music. You know, like I wrote a few quests that involve hunting down a legendary bear. So I was listening to the Revenant soundtrack while writing that, just to kind of, I really want to get in the mood. Like I put myself in every scene. So when I'm writing these scenes, I'm there. I'm living it. Like I'm crying when I'm writing scenes where I think the character should be, and maybe the player might. I don't know.
How long does it actually take you to write all these scenes out?
Each one is different. You know, some of them are really hard. Some quests just flow, and some of them are more of a struggle where I got to really, you know, and then I got to go back to the drawing board and do more research. And what's also heartbreaking is when you do that, you let the writing flow, and you're so creative, and oh, it's just coming to me. I'm inspired. The muses are talking to me, and you go, and they're like, sorry, that quest has got to be moved to this location, and we can't have it.
So that's it from us. Thank you so very much. We really appreciate your
My
time.
pleasure.
Right, cool.